So what do I think our schools didn't teach us about money? Unfortunately, that's easy. I've been a financial advisor now for over 20 years, and the vast majority of my clients wish that they had learned the basics of financing, the basics of budgeting, the basics of investing sooner. And I feel that same way personally myself, right? Most of our schools focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's. But I think we needed a 4th R. And we could call that prosperity, or really in today's world, I call it survival. And you might say, Azul, neither of those start with an R. Well, neither do arithmetic and writing. So give me a break, but if you want to hold me to the wire, let's go with riches. But why do I say survive? Because the title of this video is Surviving the Rat Race. And what is the rat race? The rat race is going through life with no margin for error. And far too many of Americans and people throughout the world are going through life with no margin for error. Over 80% of Americans say that they could not pay a $1,000 unexpected expense. Car breaks down, they have an accident, they break an arm, something like that. Over 80% of Americans, and over half of Americans that make more than $100,000 a year do not save a dime. On top of that, and related to all of this, credit card debt is at an all-time high. So we have a lot to learn about money, and let's jump in. I'm going to share some things that I've learned and I share with young people who ask. Okay, the first one is when we look at, in order to be able to save, it really comes down to revenues, how much money we can make, and expenses. So let's start on the revenue side. Our school system teaches us that more education means more money. And to a certain degree, it does, right? Getting a high school degree is important. Going to college or going to trade school is important. But at some point, the returns really don't match up with the expense. Let me give you an example. There's a professor from Boston University that did a study and looked at the earning power, the spending power of a plumber and of a physician, somebody that went to medical school. And where do you think that ends up over a lifetime? People are often surprised. It's about the same. And why is that? Well, first off, there's a huge shortage of plumbers, and there's a big demand for it, and that is a well-paying job, and it's a great job, and it takes smarts and it takes skill to be a plumber. And when a plumber is learning his or her trade, they're getting paid while they're in trade school. So they're going out and working, and they're getting paid good money while they're learning. Full disclosure, one of my best friends is a plumber, and he shares, he's done very, very well financially. And he also just shares how hard it is to recruit new plumbers. And he shared the numbers with me, and it's really shocking and surprising. So this isn't about becoming a plumbing journey person, but it's to point out a plumber gets paid while they train. A plumber doesn't have to go years and years without a salary. Now, a physician, it's not unusual for a physician to be 30 or close to 30 before they start making money and be hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt. So education does make a difference. Your undergrad probably will make a difference. Going to trade school probably will make a difference. But beyond that, be very careful of, if you're going to school because you want to make more money, just do the math and look at the educational return. So that's the revenue side. Now on the spending side, there's really 2 primary things that we need to be thinking about. And I'm not a big fan of budgeting, but we need to be saving at least 10%. In today's world, I think closer to 20%. Why is that? We were taught as kids, or at least my generation when I was a kid, was taught that save 10% and you'll be fine. And I wish that was true, but the world is so different now than from the generation that told me save 10% and you'll be fine. In that world, their retirement stool had 3 legs to it. And 2 of the legs we still have, but the 3rd leg's been ripped off our stool. And those 3 legs for them were the money that they saved, Social Security, but also for many of them, a pension. And for most of us, we don't have a pension. So now we have 2 legs to our stool. And for many of us, our Social Security is going to be taxed, which is different than it was 30 years ago. Prior to 1984, none of your Social Security was taxed. And at 1984, signed into law by Ronald Reagan, up to 50% of your Social Security could be taxed. And then under Bill Clinton, it got changed up to 85% of your Social Security could be taxed. So the three legs to our stool are different. So I don't think save 10% works. So what does work? Unfortunately, I think it's as close to 20% as you can get. And 20% is aspirational. It's hard to do, but I think it's possible. And there's two ways to get there. One is the hard way, and I call that the 50-30-20 rule. And that is try to keep your spending 50% on your needs, things like your mortgage, your utility bill, your car, keeping your car running, things like that. 30% on your wants, going out to eat, going on vacation, stuff like that. Most Amazon purchases would fall into that. And then if you keep 50 and 30 on your needs and your wants, then that leaves 20% for savings. Two ways to do that. One is hardcore, one is ripping the Band-Aid off. And that is try to live 100 days on that 50-30-20 rule. Almost like going back to the pandemic, right? If it's not absolutely necessary, you don't spend the money. You know, the first 30 days of the pandemic were hard for all of us, but most of us saved records amount of money because frankly, there wasn't a lot for us to spend our money on. So that's the hard way, 50-30-20. And ripping the Band-Aid off. The easier way is thinking about current self and future self. And what I want you to do is every time you get a raise at work, every time you get a promotion, every time you get extra money, I want you to think, half of this goes to my current self, but half of this goes to my future self. And over time, hopefully that leads you to increasing your savings. Let's say you're saving 7% now, and you're making $50,000 a year, and you get a $5,000 raise, or you get a $10,000 promotion. I want you to think about, okay, half of that goes to funding fun life, and I think it's important to enjoy the journey. The other half goes to future you that you're gonna want later. Factor number 3 is time. Time is important. I talked earlier about, my clients, and I'm a financial advisor, and the majority of my clients wish that they had learned the basics sooner. Why do they wish that? Well, one is they would have started saving money, they'd have more money. But more important, the accumulation of money and your money working harder for you than you are for your money. So if you look at how long it takes to save your first $100,000, if you're saving $10,000 a year and you're getting a 7% return, if you look at this chart, you'll see it takes almost 8 years. And 80% of that $100,000 when you're done is the dollars that you put in to this account. Only 20% is the earnings. But now I want to fast forward. Let's say you keep saving money and now you have $500,000. How long does it take you to save another $100,000 when you're starting with a base of $500,000? So how long does it take you to go from $500,000 to $600,000? It's still the same $100,000, but now it takes 2.5 years to do it. And 80% of that gain, 80% of that $100,000, $80,000 comes from the return on your existing money, and only $20,000 is new money that you're putting in. So your money's working as hard for you as you did for it. So time is really important. Another one that people don't think about, but it tends to be one of our second, third, fourth largest expense, and that's taxes. Really understanding your taxes. So many of us have heard of Warren Buffett. He's one of the richest people in the world. He's a very famous, very successful investor. He's worth over $100 billion. And in the US, the average single taxpayer, average single person, tax rate is a little over 20%, blended full in. What do you think Warren Buffett's is? One of the richest guys in the world. His is less than 10%. And he's been famous for telling the US government, hey, tax me more, and calling out the fact that on a percentage basis, he pays more in taxes than his secretary. And he says it's not fair, and he's begging the government to tax him more. Well, I've got 2 pieces of advice, one for all of us and one for Warren. Let me start with Warren. Hey, Warren, there is a box that you can check, and you can give extra money if you want. So if you want the government to tax you more, we could use the government, the country could use the money. So feel free to donate whatever you think feels good. And for the rest of us, understanding our taxes, understanding, how can we legally pay as little tax as possible. What are the ramifications? Let me give you a really big one on the ramification of taxes. Really big one is when you retire. A lot of folks have the vast majority of their money in a regular 401k or a regular IRA. You don't want to do that. You want to have three buckets. You want to have three types of accounts. Your regular IRAs, regular 401ks, that's one bucket. Your bank accounts, your taxable brokerage accounts, what I call tax me as I go, where you're paying your taxes each year. And then a third bucket, which is your Roth IRAs and your Roth 401ks. Why is that? Well, from a tax standpoint, if all your money is in a regular IRA and regular 401k, as you take money out of those accounts, that's taxable income. So every time you need money to go on vacation, you need money to buy groceries, you need money to repair your car, guess what? Those withdrawals that you're taking from your 401k are triggering taxable income. So when you're taking money out to buy a vacation, buy airfare, in addition to paying the tax on that, you're also paying the income tax on that withdrawal. So the joke in my industry is every time you buy a loaf of bread, you're paying income tax on it. And it's kind of true. So taxes are important, and you want to make sure that you have those three buckets. More importantly, you want to make sure that you understand taxes. Number 5 is managing your money. And really it comes down to, I don't care how much money you make, you have to spend less than what you've earned. You've heard me talk about that already. And then it's not enough to save. You also have to invest. We haven't talked much about that, so the investing side is really important. And what I really want to share on the investing side is your asset allocation. What percent of your portfolio is in stocks and bonds? That's going to be like 80% of the driver of your success. So I really want you to get that right. If you're young and you have plenty of time and you don't have a lot of needs for what you're saving, then you can probably have more of your portfolio exposed to stocks. Now, if you're saving for a down payment on a house, you're saving money for a down payment on a house, let's say you're hoping to buy a house in 2 years, well, you probably don't want to have too much exposure to the stock market with that, because if the stock market's down 20%, you don't want your account being down 20%. Or essentially, if you have to put $100,000 down for a down payment, really you're selling $120,000 worth of stock to do that if the market's down 20%. So hopefully that makes sense. So it has to do with how much time you have and whether you're making money, how soon until you're not going to be making money. Asset allocation is critically important. I encourage everybody, none of this is financial advice, and I encourage you to work with a financial advisor for any of the things that I've talked about here, but especially for your asset allocation, because it is so important to your long-term investing success. And then the last one is just time in the market. We talked about that, right? Time in the market is much more important than timing the market. And so many people, particularly young people, it tends to be an expensive lesson that many of us learn. I want you to learn that without going through the expense of it. So timing the market is really hard. It's the siren song. I'm here at the Puget Sound, so it's the siren song for every investor, but you're much better off. Multiple studies have shown timing really doesn't work. You're much better off. Success is time in the market, not timing the market. And speaking of time, I want to make sure that you're using your time wisely and you're taking care of yourself. If you're in your late 40s, if you're in your 50s, I want you to think about watching this video here, which is 7 things that I want you to stop doing in order to enjoy your 50s more. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.